Hello and welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you for this talk on embracing uncertainty in leading digital transformation. Today's webinar is part of the series Tech Talk X by Digital INSEAD, which is really dedicated to exploring digital technologies and their applications and the impact they have on business. And the Tech Talk series is both technical and business talks by leaders in the field, thought leaders, practitioners, innovators, entrepreneurs, faculty. If you're interested in more of the Tech Talks, please go to Digital INSEAD for more information. And we want to give a special shout out to Accenture for supporting this series and making this series possible. With that, I'm excited to speak today with Hamilton Mann. Now, to get started, I did want to ask a question. So if we could, and that is, let's just take a quick poll to get a sense of where you are as a group in terms of the maturity of digital transformation in your organization. So how would you rate the maturity of digital transformation in your organization? Very mature, mature, in progress, started, barely started, or perhaps not relevant if you're not in an organization that is going through that. Please do give us your vote, and that'll give us a sense of how to shape our comments to you. Great. While you're doing that, as I mentioned, we will be talking today about digital transformation in established organizations. What does that look like? And we will be talking to Hamilton Mann, who is a group director at Thales, which is a large B2B organization. So this is such a great setting in which to talk about digital transformation. It's always very exciting to talk about digital transformation in when we think about digital natives, that companies that were born in a digital environment. But I personally find it fascinating to ask, well, what does digital transformation look like in an established company that's already operating? Okay, so very nice. A little bit of a bell curve distribution there with a few of you in the more mature and in progress, and a few of you in the started or barely started category. Very exciting. Well, thank you so much for that picture. And let me begin perhaps by telling you a little bit about myself as your host. What am I, who am I, and where am I coming from? I'm going to share my screen with you briefly. So a little bit about myself. My name is Nathan Furr. I'm a professor in the strategy area based in the Fontainebleau campus. And I've started my career in industry before going and doing my PhD at Stanford. And I really wanted to understand these questions around innovation and technology. So you may have seen some of my work before, a series of books and articles published by Harvard about how do we get ideas? Where do new ideas come from? Or how do we test ideas to know if they're worth pursuing? How do we win support for our ideas and to do new things? And I've had the good fortune to interview some really amazing people like Elon Musk and Indra Nooyi. So very exciting, and we'll touch a little bit on this today. But in addition to that, I also study technology and digital transformation in particular. So I lead our digital transformation practice here at INSEAD, and how do we understand what leading digital transformation means for established companies. With that said, I thought I would take a little break and tell you a little bit about some of the recent work I'm doing. One of the things I noticed as I went out and I spoke to people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos is that to do anything new, they had to face a great deal of uncertainty. And they seemed particularly adept at facing the unknown. And that is something I've always struggled with. And so for the past 7 years, I've been interviewing, looking at the research and trying to understand what are the tools for navigating uncertainty. And actually, I have a book coming out this summer called The Upside of Uncertainty, which is exploring this question. And I'll just briefly summarize the idea for you. It's very simple. Anything new, anything we want to achieve, anything worth talking about, frankly, any new possibility always comes with uncertainty. And so we need to be able to face and navigate uncertainty if we want to do new things. But in addition, when uncertainty happens to us, and over the past 2 years, I think we all know what it means to have uncertainty happen to us, we sometimes forget that in that uncertainty, there's almost always some new possibility hidden inside. And I'm always reminded of this when I visit Venice, this beautiful city, this architectural gem. And we forget that it only exists because of 300 years of uncertainty as invaders were attacking the people who lived on the shore there, forcing them into the lagoon. So uncertainty always comes with possibility. And then lastly, there are tools. We can get better at it. We can do better at facing uncertainty. And so there are really 4 categories of tools, or 4 types of things we can do. The first is to reframe uncertainty from something frightening to an opportunity, to prepare for it in advance or to prime. There are things we can do so that when it happens or when we step into it, we're more ready. There are ways we take action under the unknown, ways we do that are more amenable to being successful as you're doing new things. And lastly, uncertainty always comes with challenging emotions and with setbacks and failures. And so the question is, how do you sustain yourself? So these are both thinking and doing tools for facing the unknown. And I would, of course, love your help. You can pre-order the book. That would be huge for me on Amazon. But also, if you want to know more about the tools, you can go to uncertaintypossibility.com or email me and say, hey, Nathan, I think I know a way we could get the word out about this work. I would love it, because the sad thing about writing a book is you may have great ideas, but unless people are talking about it, it's a tree falling in the forest with no one to hear. So I need your help. With that said, that gives you a little bit of context for the talk today about embracing uncertainty in leading digital transformation, because digital transformation requires doing new things, and that comes with uncertainty, and that is something that corporations are always terrified of. I do think that digital transformation requires it's paying attention to a lot of things, to strategy, to organization change, and also to innovation. And I want you to listen carefully today, because Hamilton will touch on all 3 of these lenses. So our guest today, as I mentioned, is Hamilton Mann, Group Director and Global Digital Marketing of Global Digital Marketing and Digital Transformation at Thales. He has really led this kind of cross-business unit digital transformation initiative, as well as playing the leading role in transforming marketing at Thales, and has done a number of innovative programs, designed new ways to reach customers, contact customers, as well as helping the corporation itself think about what does digital transformation mean across these very different business units and activities? How do we drive that change forward? So with that introduction, I am honored to have you today with us, Hamilton. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for this very kind introduction, Nathan, and thank you for having me.
So I'm just going to dive in, and I'm going to ask a few questions. But the first question I want to ask you is just very foundational, setting the stage. Why all this talk about digital transformation? Why is it important for a big company to even pay attention to?
And I think you're right. This is the first question that needs to, let's say, be in our mind in a way. From my perspective, I will say that digital transformation is very much important because it is a revolution in many aspects of our life, right? This is basically the 4th industrial revolution. And so it touches all the things in our way to live in this world and in the society at large. So it changed, for example, the way we access information. It changed, for example, the way we interact each other. It changed the way we can, let's say, build businesses from scratch, or let's say make evolve existing ones. It changed also, let's say, the ability that we have as humans to do things, right? I mean, with those digital technologies, it happens that new possibilities, new frontiers of what can be possible to make, let's say, are really much challenged. So this is key for us, not only, as business stakeholder, but also, let's say, as a citizen, and let's say as part of the society at large, to acknowledge the fact that this revolution, this industrial revolution, is really changing our life, sometimes with little, let's say, aspects, sometimes with medium ones, and sometimes with big ones also as well. some from invisible type of things until, you know, much visible type of intrusive type of lecture change that happen in our life every day. And this is, I think, basically the first reason why companies, of course, all around the world need to take that into account, because of course, if they want to, let's say, be and stay sustainable in the way they address their customer, which are basically human people, right? They need to understand the new context that they are living.
It's a great point, Hamilton. And, you know, I think one of the things that can be puzzling for people in organizations is to say, well, many of the core tasks that need to get done may be the same, but that digital allows you to do them in entirely different ways. So for example, I was speaking to some executives at First American. They're a title and escrow company in North America. And you know, people will always need to buy a house and be able to clear the title and go through those legal processes. Now, they've done that for decades. That task is not going away. But what they've realized is that digital allows a fundamentally different way of getting the task done, a much more efficient way. It doesn't mean people aren't involved, but people can be kind of magnified or multiplied using digital tools. And the communication channels with customers are different. And so it's kind of making sense of that duality, that on the one hand, many of the core tasks that people need to get done remain the same. But on the other hand, the way to get those things done has fundamentally changed. And you know, I think it's interesting because, you know, it's not just that the technology has changed, it's customer expectations have changed, right? You know, we're so used to like going quickly online and getting instant gratification and instant service that it's hard to imagine, even if you're in a B2B industry like your own, how can you exist? Your customers are the spillover from their normal lives, being able to order something on Amazon instantly is going to spill over into all aspects of life.
Definitely. And I think what is also important when it comes to digital transformation is that technologies are shaping the way we think. I think this is important to also understand the point that technology is not just technologies. A tool is not just a tool in a way, right? Because the way you are going to use technologies for doing a certain job, for doing, let's say, a certain task, it is going to shape your way of thinking. And more than that, it is also going to, let's say, influence your belief system, right? So with new technology, with advanced digital technologies, this is where we start to see that our belief systems as human, what we think it is possible, what we think that we know are, let's say, quite challenging in a way. And so we are also at the forefront of something that will, let's say, evolve, let's say, our way of behaving, you know, as society at large. So this is also important and key to understand that this is not something that do not have a kind of impact. I mean, this is very profound and this is huge in terms of impact, because always technologies shape our ways of thinking and the belief system that we have as human in order to consider things possible and in order also to simply, you know, having a kind of a definition of what is, you know, the task when the task is done. Just simple as that. So yes, it is going to shape and to change the way we work in many industries, of course. Yes, it is also going to be an opportunity to create new jobs from existing one, or let's say, you know, definitely new type of, let's say, activities that we may not envision today. And basically all of this is going to, of course, advance our way of seeing the society evolving, you know, making ourselves, let's say, different in a way, because we are, let's say, believing, or we are going to, let's say, believe something else in terms of the culture, the way we see ourselves in this world.
Yeah, I love how you what you said, Hamilton, about how it changes the way we think and the way we are. And if you need any evidence of that, just watch a child interact with any device. Suddenly they'll do movements like this that, you know, I didn't grow up with, or I didn't even know about, but it's much deeper than that in terms of connectedness and immediacy and how tasks get done and what is a task. And so I appreciate that profound attention to both the technology shift, but also the demand side shift of our expectations and how we think. And so this is something here to stay. Now, I did want to ask you, I opened with this topic of uncertainty. And one thing I find about corporate life is that we always talk about reducing risk and eliminating risk. And we always want things to be certain. And it's no fault of any individual. In fact, one of the great organizational thinkers, Herb Simon, said essentially that organizations are designed to try to eliminate uncertainty. But here's the challenge. When you talk about those kind of massive shifts, it's hard to know what the future is going to be. So what would you say is the role of uncertainty in this digital transformation journey? And how do you think about how to coach people to deal with it, and how do you deal with it as someone leading digital transformation?
I think this is a key point there, because I think this is what makes digital transformation complex, right? The first thing I want to say on that aspect is that there will be digital without any transformation so far. There will always be digital things and digital technologies without any kind of a transformation, right? This is key. The digital technologies and the digital means are there. They are, let's say, continuing, and they will be continuing to be there even more and more and more and more, thanks to the great work that is done by researchers, by scientists, etc., in all the different industries that exist so far. So there will be digital, even though we are not, let's say, addressing any transformation so far. So when it comes to digital transformation, what is, let's say, key in a way, it is not that much the digital aspect, but more the transformation aspect, which means that if you want to succeed in your digital transformation, you need to take care about the transformation. This is as simple as that. This is about transforming yourself. This is about transforming your organization. This is about transforming your processes. This is about transforming your businesses, right? And so when it comes to transform something into something else, you do have to face uncertainty, right? Because you know what you know. This is basic, right? You know what you have. Okay, I'm there, I'm, let's say, looking at this direction and things are clear because I know, let's say, where I'm coming from, right? But if you want to transform what you see into something else, you need to define that something else. And that something else, of course, doesn't exist yet. So this is first a kind of a mental model that you need to have in mind, and that you need to share with all the people that you need to, let's say, involve in your transformation. This is scary. This is really much scary, right? I mean, human people, we love certainties. We love, taking, things that are taken for granted, right? Because, I mean, this is our way also to feel comfortable, right? So now when you talked about transformation for real, meaning transforming something that exists where you are comfortable enough into something that doesn't exist yet, where by definition people are going to, let's say, be uncomfortable, you need to define that uncomfortable zone. And so to me, first, uncertainty comes with the first question, which is, I mean, what am I transforming for? And this is a key question there, and not that easy question. But this is not a kind of a question about digital, about technology. This is about transforming yourself into something else, and you need to define that well. So to me, that's first. This is the first point. Of course, when you, let's say, are clear enough about what kind of a transformation do you want to make and for which reason, now you need to, let's say, create that environment that will help first people to come with you and make things happen in the direction of that transformation. And so let's say it relies to address another question that is quite also complex. But I mean, without addressing that question, there will be no transformation. I mean, this is not enough to have a clear view about, what kind of things do you want to transform into something else. To me, the second question is related to how are you going to make it? And this is key. I can tell you, let's take the example of corporate, let's say, situation and organization. If you're not able to say to your team, to say to your colleagues, how are we going to make it? Things are not going to happen. Best case scenario, people are going to be very enthusiastic about, let's say, the type of adventure and journey that we imagine so far in terms of, oh yeah, it could be nice to be transformed ourselves into Amazon. Or it could be nice to be transformed ourselves into a kind of a Facebook-like type of business model. It could be nice. If you don't answer the question about how are we going to make it, nothing is going to happen. Because the reality is that as human, as people, we need to act to deliver. And the first step of action comes with the first answer you bring into how are we going to make it. And so basically, to me, the second aspect of this uncertainty is really much about framing the how. The complexity is that because you don't clearly know the future, framing the how to go to that future is a challenge. So basically in Thales, the way we have, let's say, addressed that, let's say, complex situation and equation was basically to follow a kind of a 7-step, I would say, approach, right? Processes always help, team to perform, to perform and to deliver with a kind of a directional okay type of way of addressing the challenge. So we let's say frame a kind of a 7-step process to help us together address that uncertainty related to the how do we get there. And basically, this 7-step process goes, starting by, okay, how do we, make sure that we are, identifying and answering to the question related to how things are going to be feasible. This is the first point, because there is a lot of symptoms within a team, okay? They want to see what you're talking about. They want to have proof point, right? And so you need to have the proof of concept. And so the proof of concept is there to, address the point about the feasibility. Addressing some answers about, yes, it is feasible. It helps the teams move forward toward the change because they're like, oh, we have some proof point. That future that are explained by our bosses, right? This is possible because we've seen proof points that, raise the fact that it is feasible. So that's one. The second is related to the value. Okay, it is feasible, but what kind of a value are we extracting from that feasibility, right? And so this is the second step. You need to have a kind of a proof of value. It is not enough to have the proof of feasibility. You need to have the proof of value. So this is the second step there, where the team are going to build confidence, not only being sure about the fact that this is feasible technically, for example, but they are going also to build confidence about, oh, this is going to be delivering value to somebody. And this is key. And then having, done the proof of value, we need, to enter in the kind of a prototyping. Prototyping, it's a kind of a, addition of proof of concepting and proof of valuing in a way. And the prototyping phase, the third phase, is very much about checking the usability. Yes, it is feasible. Yes, it can deliver value to someone. And basically, it will deliver value concretely in the real world because we can use it as human. There is always a meet, a kind of a fit that you need to ensure between human and technologies, right? If you build a car, but no human can, drive that car, yes, it is feasible. Yes, it is valuable. But nobody is going to use it, right? And so the story ends there. So the third point for us as Thales was to make sure that we prototype enough. So we make sure that it is going to be usable from a kind of a human perspective. So this is where, comes the best practices in terms of UX design, for example, right? And then fourth step was about, okay, now we need to build that minimum viable product, okay? this is not something new. Building MVP has been, let's say, very much promotes, based on the fact that digital, let's say, advanced a lot of, let's say, opportunities and promise. And so I know many organizations are building MVP. In Thales, what we have, let's say, learned so far through our journey is that between the three words, minimum, viable, and product, the most important is not product. I mean, I can tell you that we love technology in Thales. We are tech leaders in many aspects. So we love technologies. And so we love our product, right? We love the product that we build, and we love the product that we are, let's say, going to build. So we are very much, tech lover. However, between those three words, the word that is very much key to take into account is viable. What does it mean, viable? It means that it is a chance, a good probability, right, that there will be a customer ready to pay for that. And this is, let's say, making the case of, okay, things are feasible, we think there is value there, we envision clearly how user can use it, because we are, let's say, making the test by ourselves. But if we are not sure, if there is no enough proof points that someone is ready to pay for it, again, the story is going to end there, right? So this is key. So this is where the test is key, of course, because you need to go to the market and make sure that, people out there are going to pay for that. So this leads directly to the marketability phase, where the idea there is very much to starting to envision how to address the market when it comes to new business models or new products, right, or new services. It comes also a kind of a new go-to market to define, not the existing one. So sometimes you need to invent a kind of a new route to market, so you make sure that you are going to meet the audiences that are ready to pay. And sometimes that route has nothing to do with what we know or what we knew so far. So this is like, a kind of a stage where this is also key to have some proof point about what is the new go-to market corresponding to that new type of product, okay, to make it viable. What we, let's say, started to learn also in Thales is that feasibility, valuability, usability, the viability in terms of this is viable, yes or not, and the marketability constituting what's, the so-called valley of death. Okay, I mean, let's be clear and comfortable around this, right? And this has been a kind of a struggle for us. I can tell you that, because I mean, at the very beginning, in kindergarten, we are not trained to fail. Okay, this is completely counterintuitive, right? We are not trained to fail. We're trained to win. Okay, so everybody want to win. However, when it comes to addressing that uncertainty, you need to be resilient enough to lose, to fail, to abandon something, okay? So this phase, feasibility, valuability, usability, viability, and marketability, it is the valley of death, which means that we make the case internally in our company that it is okay to fail during this phase, okay? And so it is okay to fail because this is how we learn. This is how we learn what is feasible or not. This is how we learn what can be delivering value or not. This is how we learn what can be usable by, let's say, any human being or not. This is how we learn how can be, let's say, the product, the services be, let's say, valuable enough to generate revenue. And this is how we learn how to, let's say, go to that new market. So I think this is also a key point when it comes to addressing uncertainties, which means you need to be ready to fail, okay? Not for the pleasure of failing, but to give a clear sense of purpose, which is learn. And so it has to be formal, not informal. It has to be, let's say, a way to capture formally the learnings so it can be spread to the company, spread to the organization. At least this is the piece of, let's say, type of experience and journey that we went through in Thales. And then the last but not least, quite correspond to, let's say, something that we do in the existing business models, right? Looking at how do we scale geographically, addressing, let's say, a large part of the market share, etc. And looking at How do we optimize, which means new features, new value add, etc., making upsell and cross-sell. But basically, what is hard to make? This is, let's say, the different steps that we have there, those 5 steps when it comes to the valley of death. So this is just a long answer, let's say, to address your point, because of course this is a passionate point around this way to address uncertainty. But okay, at least this is the piece of advice and the piece of thoughts that comes from our learning and experience in Thales, which basically means, bottom line, okay, you need to make sure that you are comfortable enough to fail in the perspective of learning new things and making sure that it is a formal process that helps to spread what we have learned so far within the organization.
Hamilton, it's a really interesting answer, and I'm going to take a moment to just kind of highlight some of the things you said so they stand out. But I do want to ask you if you have any, if you have an example of something you've taken through this. Now, while you think about that, let me just highlight a few points that stand out to me about what Hamilton has said that I see very true in my experience looking at other organizations. Number one, he talked about you need a really compelling why. Why are we doing this? Not just because digital transformation is important, but there has to be a reason to do it. And then Hamilton said something very subtle but important about the how, which is you have this dilemma, which is nobody really truly knows the one right way to do digital transformation because it doesn't exist. It is a strategy choice. It is a innovation journey. And digital transformation is very much a journey. But how do you get people to come along with you on a journey when you don't know the end? Well, number one, you have a vision, and number two, you have a process. And so Hamilton talked us through this 7-step process they use to test out if a new idea has merit, and a merit along multiple dimensions. And part of that journey is recognizing that we cannot innovate unless we take on some uncertainty, and we cannot innovate unless we fail. And all the time I get asked this question, Nathan, how do we deal with failure? Our organization doesn't tolerate failure. And all I want to say to you is you will never do anything new if you don't tolerate failure. But what's the way to tolerate failure? Nobody likes failure. Instead, it's about seeing how do we learn quickly. And I remember a very technical organization like Thales going into a space where everybody thought there was a problem. They do vacuum chambers. That's one of the things they do. And there's humidity sometimes in these vacuum chambers. And every manufacturer uses vacuum manufacturing processes, is really worried about how does this change what I do. And the company had this idea, what if we could create a device? It would measure that humidity. It would be incredibly popular. Well, following something very much like this, they rapidly prototyped a workable device. It was feasible, it was valuable, it was usable. And then they went out and they tested it. And what they found out is that the humidity, yes, there was humidity present, but it was always constant. And if it's a constant variable, for the manufacturers, it wasn't really worth worrying about. Now, they could have looked back on that and said, oh my gosh, we spent 2 months and that was a failure. But actually, they saw it as an incredible success, because in the past, they would have set out a big journey, written a bunch of requirements, raised a big budget of 20, 30 million euros, spent that money only to discover there was no market there. And these folks discovered it kind of on the side with no budget, just hacking together some prototypes, and they discovered, oh my gosh, that's not a valuable thing to pursue. How wonderful that we saved that 20 to 30 million we would have spent. So it's that shift of mindset. Now, Hamilton, is there an example from Thales that you could share with us of kind of going through this, a product, process, or service to which you've kind of applied this, and or you're in the midst of applying it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about an example where we have learned a lot. We have, let's say, build a kind of, let's say, way of addressing that transformation at the very stage of our, let's say, digital transformation plan. And we, let's say, take the opportunity to say, okay, look, we are going to give the opportunity to all the organization, right? So we operate in 68 countries. And we have something, let's say, like 31 business lines, driving the businesses worldwide. In Thales, we operate in different, let's say, type of market segments: space, defense, transportation, aerospace, and security, right? And so we give the opportunity to the whole company, the entire people that we have in the company, to say, guys, this is the opportunity. If you do have an ideas that can help our customer, tackle very, let's say, complex question, such as how do we, let's say, make possible to have connectivity anywhere, let's say, we are at land, let's say, in the air, when we're taking the airplane, for example. How do we can help our customers to make sure that anywhere they are, they do have connectivity, for example, right? Was a kind of a question to help the teams to figure out what is the why, right? And many kind of example like this. And then what we, let's say, structure in a kind of a very, let's say, process-wide approach was to say, we give a call for action to all the people, okay? It was, let's say, a very diverse way of addressing and embracing the workforce, because anyone do have and did have the chance to, let's say, come with an ideas, right? Procurement, legal people, IT people, engineering people, no matter what kind of a job you are making in the group, you're welcome with your ideas. And we set a kind of a rule, because we believe from the very beginning that diversity will help the creativities and come up with some, let's say, new ideas. So we set a kind of a rule to, let's say, encourage diversity. First, to come with an idea as a team, not as a kind of individual, but, as a team. Second, make sure that in your team, you have a diverse, type of, let's say, competencies and skill set. So it helps and it encourages also the teams to, let's say, come very diverse with their idea. And last but not least, to make sure that this is something that is going to be, let's say, shape the mindset of the management, right? That is going to be something that we will struggle a little bit with, right? Because I think that innovation and the way to address new things, right, comes also with a bit of confrontation, a bit of tension between what exists today versus what we can envision. So there is a tension, and we need, of course, to accept and leave room to discuss that tension. So we have, let's say, make it clear to the team that, okay, you come with some, let's say, things that will be, let's say, a kind of a struggle for us to, let's say, understand. It will be your work to pitch and to, let's say, make the case of feasibility, usability, and all the points that we are, let's say, that we have, let's say, explained earlier. So this is, to me, the kind of example from that journeys, because we repeat that experience, let's say, a lot of time. From that journey, we have, let's say, seen emerge some new business models that actually generating, additional revenue for the group. And I can tell you that some of those business models could not, let's say, happen in any case from, let's say, our regular and traditional way of addressing the strategy. It has to come in a kind of adjacent thinking, right? I'm thinking, for example, of an application, right, that the team developed so far from a kind of a very simple idea. They say, okay, we use Slack, each and every day between us to exchange information, to keep, keep in touch, etc. And we know that our customers sometimes also individually, in their private life, they use also Slack, right? And so they come up with the idea of saying, okay, look, maybe we can invent a kind of a Slack-like, right, application that will be dedicated for defense and highly confidential information in order to, let's say, help structure a kind of a new way of working and collaborating with those new, way and practices of exchanging and interacting each other. So let's say we're taking benefits from the reflex and from the habits that each and every one of us has, let's say, built in our private life to empower and to, let's say, get even more productivity when it comes to dealing with some confidential and defense-like, type of subject. So I can tell you that, from the very beginning of that idea, it was something around 3 to 4 years ago, right? They come with that idea, and it was quite challenging for, us as a company to imagine a kind of application like this, because many questions was raised. Oh, are you sure that our customer in the defense sector are going to slack, like to exchange, information very confidential between us, etc., or with us? I mean, are you sure about this? Because it is completely not the norm, I can tell you that today, this application is running. We have many customers from, let's say, highly, let's say, protected type of environments, such as defense, but also some, let's say, big company and large firm that do have also confidential information to share, and they use it. So this is also, to me, a way to, let's say, give a chance to the future, right? Because we don't know it really. I mean, 3 years and past, let's say 3 to 4 years ahead, what it is going to happen, what will be the new habits, what will be the new norm, we don't know. So this is also a way to learn collectively something that will give a chance to, let's say, propagate and being at the forefront of a change. And this is also for me an opportunity to say that transforming ourselves as an organization, it is also meaning that you are influencing the transformation to your customer, right? So it is also key to take that into account. You cannot transform yourself, just looking at yourself and, expecting that you will be successful, right? Because at the end of the day, you may be transformed, but you will be alone, right? And so you want to be your business to be sustainable and sustainable. So this is key also too, because I know that, in organization, we are, focusing internally our processes, our tools, the mindset of our teams, etc., etc. I mean, one thing that is key to that transformation is the customer centricity, right? There will be no successful transformation if you do not incorporate in your thinking, in the way you want to drive that transformation, what is, let's say, the implications to your existing customer or your future one. I mean, this is key.
Yeah, I love your answer there. And I think it's really interesting as you look at these processes we're talking about. I mean, you're talking about this, how is it that we test out an idea to see if it's feasible, valuable, usable, viable, marketable? You're talking about the critical element of customer centricity. You're talking about how Thales has created a digital channel to communicate with these kind of deeply technical and sensitive relationships with your B2B clients. I can't help but kind of ask the question, Hamilton, as somebody who has led digital transformation in a B2B company, how do you see digital transformation as being the same or different between a B2B environment versus a B2C environment?
Oh, I think that this is a very interesting question there, because I can tell you that also internally, we raise a lot that question, right? We see best practices, or let's say some, way of working coming from, let's say, the external world, right? And we challenge ourselves around the question, oh, this is something that we can, let's say, implement in Thales. And I can tell you that sometimes there is a bit of pushback, right? Okay, because we say, oh, this is for B2C only, right? I mean, we don't look at that, okay? So don't look at that direction. This is for B2C. This is not our world, right? We're too much different, right? I mean, bottom line, to me, that question gives me the opportunity to say that we have learned a lot from the difference. We have learned a lot from, let's say, all the contexts, all the companies that are not like us, right? And so to me, when it comes to the difference between B2B, B2C, the difference between civil businesses and defense businesses, for example, the difference, I mean, many types of difference that we can imagine. I mean, basically, this is a way to segment the world, okay? This is the way we have, let's say, give to ourselves, because we love certainty, right? So we took a kind of a way to segment the world that we have, and we feel good with that. Okay, so there is the B2C, there is the B2B, there is defense and there is civil, there is, let's say, healthcare, and there is, let's say, automotive, right? This is the way to segment the world, and we feel comfortable with that because it gives an answer to us around who do you are? I mean, what is the kind of a characteristic that, let's say, define you? I think that the digital transformation is a huge opportunity, right? To go beyond, let's say, the way we segment the existing world, I would say, right? To re-challenge, let's say, our lens, right? So basically, the question will be not maybe, let's say, only about the difference between B2C, B2B, or healthcare, automotive, or maybe, any kind of a segment that we can take, right? And will be more about how can I learn from, different sector, different industries, different segments that are not core to my business today. Because this is where you are going to find, those kind of, let's say, ideas that do not connect directly to what you do, but which has a kind of, let's say, sense of new things that we may implement and that you can implement, partnering also with sometimes new industry, new companies, etc., that are not in your radar in the very first place. So I think that digital transformation is very much a great invitation and a great opportunity to look beyond the difference and see what works, not only in your industry, in your, let's say, companies, in companies that look, like the ones that you are living, etc., and that you are running, but let's say more importantly, to look at difference and to look at, let's say, a kind of an external type of experience coming from people, companies, organizations that are way different from where you are. This is where you get the most, let's say, relevant opportunities in a way to think different, as he said.
Hamilton, I couldn't agree more in the idea that if all we look at is firms in our industry, at the very best, we're going to be neck and neck. We're going to be in parallel with them, and we're not going to really reinvent anything. I can tell you from my work on innovation that the essence of innovation, the essence of new ideas, is recombining ideas from different domains and disciplines. So how could you invent anything new, develop anything new, if all you're doing is looking at only the companies who are the most like you? You're just looking in a mirror. Whoa, look, what a handsome person that is. What a handsome company, And well, you got to look ahead. There's so many opportunities to look at companies that have already taken digital initiatives, gone through digital transformation, created new digital tools, and to borrow those back. And in a way, I hope that relieves the stress and pressure on people. It is not that you have to fundamentally, let me say, it's not that you have to reinvent your industry by having some kind of ray of light come down from the heavens and transform your brain. It's, you can look at it and say, we use Slack all the time in work and we use it over here. Why couldn't we use it there? And I would challenge you. I would say most of the big business ideas out there that you see, the really transformational, disruptive things, we could play a game together, and I bet we could push back and say, you know what? They just kind of borrowed that from there. If you think about Uber, we say, oh my gosh, Uber was so amazing. Yeah, sorry, ride sharing has been around forever. What they did is they said, oh, having a supercomputer in your pocket with a GPS location device and a digital platform allows us to do ride sharing way better than we did it in the past. And so, it's playing with those, and the best way is to learn from those industries ahead of us. Hamilton, one thing is I was going to ask you about some of these organizational change, transformation elements, and actually we have a lot of great questions around that. So if you don't mind, what I'd love to do is I'd love to start kind of tackling some of these questions, which will help us get at that. And, one great question from Marta was, Marta said, you've mentioned the importance of the way to onboard the organization into the transformation and the framing of change. So what's your opinion about the best way to onboard your ecosystem, your partners and customers? I mean, you were just talking about working with different types of partners. How do you onboard your ecosystem into the transformation? How can you leverage that change and make sure that you are exploiting the existing opportunities as a way to improve your transformation path? So it's not just about you, it's about your customers, it's about your partners. How do you see that? How do you onboard your ecosystem?
Thank you very much, Martha, for that question. Because I think this is also a key aspect of, let's say, the type of ingredient that you need to have, let's say, in your hand if you want to be successful in the digital transformation. I think what we have experienced so far in Thales is that something works very well when it comes to, let's say, involve the people in the transformation is making sure that this is not a kind of a corporate transformation coming from, let's say, the top, and let's say, addressing the whole organization like the rain, right? I mean, something that works very well is to start small, to start very humble, right? So in each and every dimension of what means starting small and starting very much humble on the things, right? And so I'm taking one dimension of that, which means, okay, to start, let's go from the bottom to the top and not the other way around. So you need to start the transformation with some people that are doing the job each and every day, that will be, let's say, impacted with the type of transformation that you want to make and that you envision. It could be your partner, your customer, your colleagues, right? You need to start with those people first, right? To build that kind of a confidence in addressing the transformation. So it starts with 2, 3, 4, 5 people sometimes, starting small. The way it is going to, let's say, build that, let's say, confidence at a very small and modest level will give you some, let's say, element, argument, experience to go further and further and further and to convince from 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to hundreds, hundreds to thousands of people, okay? And this is true. I mean, this is quite the experience that we are, let's say, living each and every day in Thales, right? We have, let's say, tried many things to, to tackle that point around how do we make sure we, let's say, involve people in the transformation. This way work, right? This way work. So it means that it takes time, okay? It takes time. And so this is something that is key also as well, because you need to, let's say, make sure that based on your plan, you're not too much ambitious in terms of outcomes. So you take the time to start with 2, 5, 10, 20, etc., etc. So to me, maybe the first, let's say, aspect that I would like to share around that question, Martha, is very much, start small with the key stakeholders that are directly impacted with the type of transformation that you envision. And so to make sure to convince, human to human, Paul, Pierre, Jacques, Julie, Kathleen, etc., etc. This is the way to build confidence, not at individual level, but at group level. And this is where you start to, let's say, transform mindset also as well. And then it starts to becoming a kind of a movement, as we say, right? Because when you have a bunch of people, even though it is 5 people, right? This starts to be enough people to convince another group of 5, etc., etc. And so to me, this is a key aspect. And I mentioned that on purpose because sometimes it happens that we think, okay, let's have the sponsorship at executive level, right? And then we are going to put our executive, all of them, taking the microphone and, speaking to all the companies and all the employees saying, okay, this is what we need to do, right, guys? And so now let's do it, okay? And we think this is the secret sauce for, let's say, making the change happening. I mean, maybe sometimes in some, let's say, organization, by chance, this is going to be enough. I mean, basically, my experience is that you need to secure of, let's say, having some release from the bottom of the situation of the change, from the bottom of the situation that needs to be transformed. And then it is going to be, like, say, the cherry of the cake, having the executive coming like, oh, this is what we have, to do because, okay, looks, right? This is happening now. And this is happening now in our company also, right? So to me, this is like the kind of a piece of advice and piece of experience that I can share on that.
Okay. Hamilton, I just want to validate the importance of that starting small. I mean, I got to spend a little bit of time with Rahul Kapoor, who leads Bosch's artificial intelligence initiative, which has become a massive, massive part of Bosch's strategy. But I was so struck by how he talked about how they started. He said, you know, if we think about artificial intelligence, huge domain, incredibly complex, many possibilities. What did he say about how he got it started? He said, I just looked for 3 use cases where I knew we could absolutely succeed in creating value. I picked 3 so that I made sure that 1 worked and that we could have that 1 success to build on. And what he told us the story about it, he said it was very simple. He said we have a assembly line with parts going down it, sending a faulty part into the field is expensive to fix. So we have a camera that's taking pictures, and based on the picture, if we think there might be a fault, a human inspects it. And he said, what we did was so simple. We just created a little learning loop so that we could feed back into the machine. Okay, image said there was a fault. Did the human agree? And if the human said no fault and it went into the field, did it come back as a failure? And that little learning loop is a very simple application of AI. That very simple loop allowed them to reduce the percentage of parts needing inspection from like 20% to 5%, and then the number of failed parts in the field from like 5% to essentially 0. When you do that and people can, they see the value of it immediately, they're like, oh, I'm curious about how you could do that for me, and it builds. So I just want to like really put some thrust behind what you're saying. Here's another question from Roland. He talked about how the framing the how requires a multidisciplinary approach. We to do work in a multidisciplinary way, we need to collaborate. So how do you get people to collaborate? How do you get people to start collaborating across boundaries?
Oh, that's a key aspect there, and this is a challenging one also as well, because I never, let's say, met any organization, right? I'm talking about, let's say, a lot of stakeholders, let's say, that work in many companies, and quite very, let's say, different companies from Thales in a way. And I never met any of my peers telling me that, oh, collaboration is not our issue. I mean, this is a kind of a common issue, and you can meet that issue anywhere. Collaboration. And I think the let's say the heart of that issue comes from the fact that to have a collaboration, you need to have, let's say, an interest to collaborate, right? And I will, let's say even more. You need to be you need to, let's say, need the help of somebody else, okay, to achieve your goals. So I'm going to be very much direct on that question, right? If you want to enhance collaboration, you need to change the objectives of the people. So you make sure that the objectives of the people are not achievable only by themselves or only by, let's say, working in their department, talking with anybody else. You need to make sure that you frame some objectives that are only achievable if they partner with some other departments, with some other partner, external parties, with some startup, etc., etc. And so then people are going to, let's say, be smart and say, okay, look, we have that objective. I want to secure my bonus there in the end of the year for that example, because this is also a motivation, right? And then, okay, let's look at the way we can deal with some other department, other people, other colleagues in the companies to do that together. And I think this is something key. And sometimes the belief systems related to the way we set the objectives of the teams, and it is, of course, let's say, completely key when it comes to transformation. This is, let's say, regulating and, let's say, putting a kind of a limit to the collaboration that you can expect to see. So to me, this is quite a kind of a very, actionable way of, let's say, enhancing collaboration within an organization.
Hamilton, what a great answer. And I wish we had time to go through all the remaining questions, but unfortunately, our time is up. I want to give a special thanks to Hamilton, to you for taking the time out to join us, but also all of those who are joining us on the webinar and the video. your support for INSEAD is immensely important. And I can say as faculty member, we have a warm spot in our heart for each one of you as part of a family, a collaborative group. And so thank you, Hamilton, for joining us as part of that collaborative family today, that multidisciplinary family. And thank you for your wisdom. I'm sure you can reach out to Hamilton in the future if you have more questions, and to me as well. But thank you again for joining us for this tech talk at Digital at INSEAD.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.